Hey, happy Thursday, Moms of Master Books. I'm here with my daughter, Brittany.
Hi.
And Brittany is also our publicist. And today, though, she's been working down in the warehouse helping to fulfill orders because we've had a lot of sales. So she's Sweatshirt Thursday. Uh, but I snagged her because of the topic. So I want to talk today about building connections and networking. I think networking is one of the biggest things we can teach our kids. Why? And so let's talk a little bit about that. It's often said, right, when it comes to getting jobs, having opportunities, that type of thing, what people say, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And in a lot of cases, there's a lot of truth to that. I've had so many opportunities in my life because of the connections that I've had and the people that I've known. And let's just unpack that a little bit. We train them with skills so that they can communicate effectively. They have knowledge, they have understanding of the world around them, and that type of thing. But we also need to prepare them to connect to the real world. And part of that process is building a network. But if I could, I'd like to talk a little bit about changing the paradigm. Before I do, I just want to let everybody know, be sure to comment for a chance to have 2,500 reward points added to your account. That's $25 of purchasing power at Master Books.
It's good stuff.
It is good stuff. We have fun choosing people. For anybody who doesn't know the word paradigm, I want to show you the word paradigm. I'm going to switch to my desk cam. This would be an example of a paradigm. We have a picture here, and when your eyes first look at the picture, you probably will see one of two things. One, you may see an old lady. The old lady, this would be her eyeball, this would be her nose, her mouth. She has like a fur shawl over her and maybe a feather coming out from above her apron. That's one way of looking at this. A paradigm is when you see the same picture but see another way of looking at it. And so if I see the old lady, it's often hard to see the second picture unless somebody points it out to me. In this same picture is a beautiful young lady. Here is her eyelash, a little bit of her nose, her cheekbone, her chin. She's wearing a necklace. She has a fur around her. She has a feather coming out the front of her head and some kind of a veil or a shawl over her. So when we talk about a different paradigm, the things that we're referring to is being able to see a different way of looking at things. So the world, we hear often about you need to build a network, and it's not who you know, what you know, that type of thing. But what about for us as believers? Well, it's interesting because I think Jesus said it best. He asked, what were the greatest commandments? And what did Jesus say? He said the first commandment is that you would love the Lord God with all your heart, soul, and mind. So everything you have, be sure to love the Lord your God. Why? Because he's our creator, and that's what we were created to do, to love him and to enjoy everything that the benefits of that relationship. The second thing is to love others as yourself, to love your neighbor as yourself. It's interesting. He didn't just say to love your neighbor. He said to love your neighbor as yourself. That's a lot harder. I can love my neighbors this much. But to love them as myself is a whole different level. In Philippians 2:3, it says to esteem others as better than ourselves. And so part of building connections, the paradigm shift is on the front side, I build a connection because I'm selfish and I know that my connections will give me opportunities. The flip side is the paradigm shift is as a believer, I build connections because I'm actually following the command to love others and esteeming them as greater than myself. And in doing that, I'm actually being a better human being. I'm being a better person when I look at somebody else and I see them as a human who has needs. The greatest need, I believe, that we have as humans is to be seen and to be loved. And nothing makes me feel better when I go into a new situation, but to have a leader or somebody there say, hey, I see you. I know who you are. I value the fact that you're here and I value your time and I appreciate that. that person at that moment is esteeming me as better than themselves, because a lot of times as leaders, we're like, look at me, see me, instead of this other paradigm of, hey, I am a leader here, but I recognize you and I recognize your importance and the value that you bring to me. And so as we talk about the connections today, I want to just do it from the paradigm of doing it as a believer, the biblical model of esteeming others as better than ourselves for the purpose of being generous, of showing love, because Jesus knew when we do this, this is what we want. This is part of who we are as people. Okay. There's a reason I brought Brittany in. 3 years ago, almost 4 years ago, three years ago. Okay, 3 years ago, going on 4. We moved our whole family from New York to Arkansas. Brittany, how old were you? You were 17?
Yeah, 17.
17 at the time. And we had pastored a church we'd been involved in that church for like 8 years. So Brittany she played drums, and she had been part of the worship team. She had made friends there. So from the time she's 9 years old to the time she's 17, she had made all these connections and built up a network. And all of a sudden we pack up two moving vans and we move our whole family, and suddenly we're starting over from scratch. And along the way, Brittany's starting to learn some really important lessons about building connections. So I want to tap into that, and some of the things that she's learned. So when we had the church, one of the things that we would say to you is, you've got to go make a connection with somebody. Just go introduce themselves and that type of thing. And you made some good friends doing that. What would you say you learned from that at a young age?
Learn from going and reaching out to people and connecting with people. So right now I'm just learning that when I go into a new situation or a new room or just something new, and I become very self-aware and uncomfortable, and I have somebody else to come over to me and engage with me, and welcome me into the group. And in doing that, I tend to assume that everybody else is confident and forthgoing when I'm not. But when I take a step back and think about it, I realize that everyone in the room, not just me, has a want and a need to be noticed and feel welcomed. And so as people, we're all constantly searching for that belonging, that connection, that acceptance, and it's fulfilled by other people. So in realizing that, I also realized that it must be just as uncomfortable for somebody else to reach out to me as it is for me to reach out to them.
Mm-hmm. So when you approach building a connection, if you take it from the paradigm of, I'm doing this actually to be a more generous human being, and I'm giving this person a gift. So when I see somebody else in the room and I connect with them, by just letting them know that I see them as a human being, I'm building connections. And in building the connection, though, if I do it from a standpoint of, I'm giving you a gift rather than I need to meet you to get something.
Right. Serving people.
Yes. Because as we move, we're trying to find out who are our connections. And sometimes it's easy to fall into the spot of trying to make a connection to get something. And so our first attempt is, I need you to see me, as opposed to I see you.
Yeah, I agree. It's very much, you have to shift your focus. It's not somebody comes over to me and says hi and invites me into the group. I need to kind of take a step forward and serve the needs of others and be like, you probably feel the same way, and so I'll come over and I'll talk to you instead. Right.
But you have to be willing to be vulnerable, because there's rejection, the potential for rejection. There's a potential for, boundary, all these things that we kind of have the defenses and why we go slow into it. So it's a challenge, because we have to deny ourselves to esteem somebody better. But I think if we have the right mindset, we go into it with the idea that I'm not doing this to get something from you. I'm giving you a gift. I see you as a human being. I recognize you. I value that you are a human being, and you're sharing this experience in time and space that God has given to us. Brittany loves music, and we've had the opportunity to go and see a number of bands and different stuff, and even with musicians that we meet, sometimes it's one of the ways you connect with them. How do you make a connection a lot of times in that space?
Really just understanding, like over the years, because I've met so many people, um, so many band members and stuff, and realizing that they really are human, and it's okay to just like go up and say hi to them. A lot of times we put them up high and we're like, we don't compare to the level that they're at, but really they're just human and they're trying to find connection the same as we are. So that makes it easier to go up to them, and when we take them off the pedestal and put them kind of there at like the same level we are, really it makes it easier to go out and reach out to people.
So I'm going to do because this is okay. So teaching, especially a homeschool kid, we have limited opportunities for socialization, really. Homeschool students are more socialized in that they have a greater bandwidth of experience. A standard public school child gets on the bus and stays with, first grade students, second grade students, third grade students, and so they're horizontally socialized. Homeschool students are vertically socialized. They are exposed to a wide range of ages, and they develop those comforts. So that's something we can really play on as our advantage. I think we have to give our kids experiences. I noticed that, like, as we've moved here, we've tried to make an attempt to visit, amusement parks and different things like that, the churches that we go to, places that they have a lot of exposure and experiences, because when we build connections, one of the things we're trying to do is to build a connection that says, I have an experience like that. Mm-hmm. So I did a lot of travel to hospitals all over the country in a previous job. So when somebody tells me something about where they live, the first thing I try to do is know, what hospital are you close to? Because chances are I can place you in a region by the hospital, and I can talk about that hospital. What I've seen you do is you love fashion, even though today you're in a hoodie. You like fashion, and you enjoy walking up to somebody and saying, I love your hair. I love your outfit. In fact, you did that at a Starbucks recently at a conference, and it turned out to actually be somebody who is
Christian Stanfield's wife. Yeah.
Yeah. But you were just being generous as a human being and saying, I see you, and there's something special about you.
Right. Sometimes just stepping out, knowing, like, so that situation, I was at a Starbucks and I was sitting off at the table and I saw this lady going through the checkout, and I just went up to her and said, I love your outfit. Like, you're super cute. And she's like, oh my goodness, you just made my day. And she gave me a hug, and she engaged a little bit more onto that. But then that was kind of the end of it. I wasn't trying to get anything out of that moment other than to just kind of, hey, I saw you and just wanted to give you a little bit of encouragement through the day. And then later when I went back to, it was at the Passion Conference. Later when I went back to the conference, I realized that it was Christian Stanfield's wife. So that was kind of cool, but
Yeah. Well, and one of the things you're learning in this new world that we live in is the quality of the connections you have and the willingness that you have to be vulnerable is helpful to the quality of experience that you're having.
Definitely.
If you're just waiting for other people to serve you, right? And this is the hard part, okay? This is like teaching writing. This is like teaching algebra. Our brains don't like things that cause stress. Rejection is one of the number one stresses, because our greatest need as humans is to feel loved and accepted. And so if I step out and you reject me, the pain I'm going to feel, unless I'm prepared for that, the pain I'm going to feel is too great. The reward is too great for the risk. So you really have to be prepared mentally. It really doesn't matter. I'm going to bless you with a compliment, or I'm going to bless you by saying, I see you, I value who you are, and whether you accept it or not, it's a gift. You don't owe me anything. And I think that paradigm is really important when we network.
Right. I think going into it too, thinking that we tend to put people, not just the musicians, but like if I walk into a room and you're there with a bunch of people, I tend to think that everybody else in that room is confident and has their life together when they really don't.
Right.
And so when I realized you're probably on the same level as me, that helps me to kind of step out and say hi and that sort of thing.
Modeling is very important, I think, for our kids. So we can't expect our kids to be socialites and to do this unless we do it as well. And developing skill in this area of being able to listen to people, being able to be present in the moment. Nothing worse than somebody pulling out their phone while you're talking to them, or me doing that to other people. Those are really big things that we need to model to our kids, because they'll follow our example. And a lot of homeschoolers, like, I don't know, none of you guys were really shy. You might have been the shyest.
Probably.
My two sons, they loved, like, if we went to a homeschool convention, their goal was to bring home the most stuff that they could get for free. So they made friends with every booth, to the point that I had to go and pull them out, right? Brandon would bring home bags of stuff that they're like, well, he just thought I was a good guy, or, and so he was always looking for connections. And it was funny to watch them work a convention hall, because they enjoyed that relationship. And I'd always cringe a little bit, but at the same time, I was happy to see that they were making those connections. So I'm going to switch to the other camera. There's something that I would like to illustrate for the kids, for us to understand how to teach our kids. In relationships, we have different circles. Okay, so in the center of the circle, we have our intimate relationships. Those relationships are husband, wife, brother, sister, mother, father, close relationships that can be trusted. Then we have the friend zone. Friend zones they can be trusted to an extent, but perhaps we don't trust them at the same level we do an intimate relationship. On the very outside level, we have acquaintances. These are people that we would have met. They are part of our network once we meet them, and those relationships can build. So once I meet a lot of acquaintances, sorry, my handwriting is always remarkable, being a left-handed person. We meet a lot of acquaintances. A few of those acquaintances enter the friend zone. And in the friend zone, very few of those enter into an intimate zone. Just because I meet somebody and they become an acquaintance doesn't mean that they've earned the right, or that they've earned the trust to be in this zone, in the intimate zone. So we want to teach our kids, when I meet somebody, they become an acquaintance, and I begin developing a relationship. And when they've proven themselves trustworthy, and they've proven themselves that they also are worthy of friendship, then we move them into the friend zone. And from the friend zone, they continue to develop that relationship. And some of those relationships will move into the intimate zone, where this is a person who can be trusted. Right? And we sometimes people actually get moved out of a zone. Perhaps we moved them in too quickly into an intimate zone and found out they weren't trustworthy. Relationships, in that case, we move them back out into an acquaintance zone. And so we are able to judge a little bit on not everybody is worthy of being intimate. And part of that, I think, goes into understanding human nature, and just being aware that when I meet somebody, so when you met her and said, I love your outfit and I think you're really cute, she became an acquaintance at that time.
Right.
But she wasn't a friend.
Right.
And so you have a healthy understanding that it didn't really mean that much at that level, but we connected.
Right.
So a lot of what we're talking about in networks is, okay, so I'm going to switch back over. In sales, one of the things we tend to do is we build funnels. So in this funnel, acquaintances are out here, and from that, a certain amount of them will become friends, and a very few amount through the funnel come intimate relationships. And so what we're talking about in networking is building a large amount of acquaintances, knowing that some of those acquaintances will become friends, and in the friend zone to more intimate relationships. But then naturally, the connections we make give us opportunities. So I don't think we should look at networking as a way of, I need to teach my kids how to shake people's hands, make a good first impression, how to be present in a conversation. I don't think we should teach them that because we want them to have good job opportunities and be successful. I think we need to switch the paradigm. I think we want to teach them that because that's what good Christian people do. That's what people do in the example of Christ. Mm-hmm. They also find the least of these, those who aren't always worthy of attention by society's standards, just like Christ did, and saying, I see you. I see the pain that you're experiencing.
And I go to a camp every summer, and I usually try and do this. It's like a challenge for me. There will be people in our dorm room who will be shy and quiet and kind of disconnect from the group. And so by the end of the week, my goal is to try and get them to engage more like as at the level the rest of us are doing. And so that's always been kind of fun for me. If you kind of like think of them like it's a challenge for yourself
to make that
to kind of invite the people who tend to be like maybe the outsiders in.
In doing that, why? Because usually those people don't bring value.
Right.
If you go to a music camp, the ones that you want to get attention from are typically going to be the ones who are the ones on stage, or the ones who are more popular or connected some way. But by serving the least of these, we do it because that's the right thing to do as humans and as Christians. When Jesus said, love your neighbor as yourself, what do I want the most in that place?
Right. And it's like Proverbs 18:24 says, I wrote that down, a man that hath friends must show himself friendly, and there's a friend that sticketh closer than a brother.
Yeah, something to really teach our kids and drill home. A man who has friends must be friendly. That if we have to put ourselves out there. And it's hard when you move to a new place and you're not part of the culture, because we don't speak Southern at all. And I mean, there's a whole like culture here in the South that hasn't really been, it's just not normal to us because we weren't, I spent 47 years in a culture of New York. And then we move here and everything, body language, dress, everything is different. Right. So developing self-confidence is one thing. So experiences are important, and we have to be agents of our kids. So we've looked to find opportunities like churches and experiences where our kids have these connections and can begin developing the skills. And it's exciting in a lot of ways. One of the challenges for me at the most recent church is the pastor and his wife are younger there. And most of my life, selfishly and shamefully, I've been kind of like right here, right? Look over here. And so as we move into this new church, the dynamic is shifting, and I'm seeing the connections that are happening with my kids. And I'm excited to be part of it because I'm more an agent now. I'm more like, this is the show. This is the star of the show. And have you met my daughter? Have you met my sons? And they're actually more interested in actually meeting them. So sometimes as adults, we also have to get out of the way and show our kids how to make connections, but also show them how to say, this is my son, and then teach our kids how to respond.
Definitely.
And I think another important thing that we can teach our kids is look for connection points. What is it, like have these conversations. What is it that an older person in church wants? See, now I'm an older person in church. I'm not quite the senior citizen age, but I feel like it in this church. What is it that person is looking for? And sometimes just having somebody say, hey, I'm glad you're here today. I'm glad you made it. is something that makes me feel special. Or even just when the pastor comes by, is like that, as silly as it sounds, that makes me feel like, wow, somebody just connected with me as a human being.
Right. For me, it's my name. If somebody says, "Hey, Brittany, how are you?" I'm like, "Oh, you remember my name." Like,
Yeah.
it's a magical moment.
Yeah. We met somebody when we first moved here, a very nice gentleman, and he made it a point to know our whole family's names. And every time we came around, he'd be like, "Hey, Brittany, Jamin, he'd go through the whole clan." And in a world where nobody cared, really, it didn't feel like anybody cared about who we were.
Right.
The fact that he actually took the time to know our names and would make that connection. And he had spent most of his life in a people business, so he kind of understood the importance of this. But they became dear friends just because he made us feel like we mattered.
You didn't have to know anything else. You don't have to know anything else about anybody except for their name, and it just makes them feel like you know them so well.
Right. Yeah. There are times that we encounter mean girls or mean guys, but a lot of times people are as insecure and as concerned about rejection as we are. And so teaching our kids to really look for a way to connect. Something, a couple of ideas. A nursing home would be a great place to talk to the community, the events coordinator in a nursing home, and just ask if you could stop by and hand out a flower to the patients that are there. They're people that society has said, okay, we're moving you here and setting life aside, and you've kind of been forgotten and life is going on. And that would be a great place to teach the kids how to make connections with people, and just to show them that I see you, I care that you're here, I haven't forgotten about you, and I'm praying for you. Connecting with people at church. I don't always enjoy handshaking time and that, but there are still times that we can connect with somebody to say to the pastor. Pastors, in case you didn't know, sometimes pastors are the most insecure people in the church. And they put everything they have on the line, and then wait for everybody going out the door to tell them, you're a winner, you're a winner, you're a loser, you're a loser, you're a loser, you're a winner, you're a loser, right? And so to teach your child to say, that was good, Pastor, or I appreciated that, Pastor, is something that they could do and within their power to be a good and generous human being. Mm-hmm. Do you have anything else to add?
I'd say just looking for things to connect on. For me, like, if I reach out to somebody, we'll connect. We'll find a way to connect at some level. Like, if it's a girl, it's usually about like, oh, I like your hair. Do you have highlights? You can just like ask all sorts of questions about, like, there's so many questions you can ask about somebody's hair. If it's with a guy, I can hold my own with a conversation about sports if I need to. I don't know everything, but even if I don't, I can ask them. And by asking questions, they feel like they're bringing value to the conversation and what we're talking about. So I just think finding little things and remembering to ask questions, all those kind of help when you're just starting to kind of like build your acquaintances.
So Sarah Kelly says, Brittany, my 9-year-old Bailey, hi Bailey, is really struggling with putting herself in the situation. What would your advice be to her?
I think for me, it's just getting myself out of the way. You kind of have to go in character. I have to think when I go into a room, I tend to shrink in. And you point this out too, which is helpful for me to know that I kind of like shrink in, you make yourself as small as possible. I kind of have to just kind of go in, make myself have good posture, go forward and just like reach out to people. It's not easy, but just again, finding that, just ask a question. Like, I love your hair. Do you do highlights? Where do you get it cut? Find something. Even like if you plan ahead of time, come up with something to ask people.
I love your shirt.
Right. We can connect on so many levels. There's so many questions you can ask. But also for me, this is kind of like, it feels so dumb, but it helps me so much. I came up with a list of questions that I could ask people. When we moved, it was so hard for me to engage with people when I didn't know I wasn't familiar with the body language they had, or like you said, the southern alities of conversations and stuff. So I put together a list of things that I could ask somebody, and maybe some questions that could follow after that. And so maybe that would be helpful for her if you guys just kind of came up with a list of general questions that you could go up to somebody and comment on or ask.
People typically like to talk about themselves.
People love to talk about themselves.
So,
I love to talk about myself.
So if you ask questions,
right,
and then have follow-up questions, it's really learning to be a good listener.
Mm-hmm. And getting excited about the things that other people, if they respond. So if I say I love music and you say, oh my goodness, me too, like kind of show some energy. And that's what I found is helpful, is like put a little bit more excitement and energy than you typically would with maybe like a friend. Like if a friend tells you something, like you're comfortable with them, you may not put as much energy and excitement towards that, if that makes sense. But like if you say if I say I'm interested in music, oh my goodness, me too, like get excited, and then we both are kind of like, it puts the conversation at ease, I find, at least.
If you do it from the paradigm of esteeming others as greater than ourselves, because when I say something and you show enthusiasm for what I just said,
right,
you make me feel valuable. Right. So if I do that in return, then that extends that same thing.
Right. So yeah, that would be my advice.
I think birth order is one of these obstacles we have. I was 6 years younger than my brother. He was, in 10th grade, he was 240 pounds, 6'4". He was a star of the football team, the basketball team. He threw a shot put. I was a scrawny little kid, 6 years younger than him, and everybody would compare us. And I kind of learned to fade into the shadows. And then most of my life, my dad was a pastor, most of my life I would be told, you're to be the church mouse. You're to be seen and not heard. And so overcoming that as an adult became a real challenge, because every time I would go into a setting, I would retreat into little brother mode, be seen and not heard. I think it's important because Brittany's the middle. So she has 3 above her and then 4 below her. And her brothers were big personalities. Her older sister is a strong personality. Her younger sister is one of those big personalities. And Brittany would just kind of step in, and it was hard for her to kind of say, look at me, right?
Yeah, I had to find ways. Like, so my hair is one way. I've dyed my hair red for a lot of years, but that was one way that I would kind of have my own. But it was a quieter way to kind of look at me.
To be noticed.
Right.
Yeah, because when you have 9 brothers and sisters, and some of them are rather large personalities, getting noticed in that clan is a challenge. So I think as parents, we have to be aware of that and make opportunities for our kids. And we have to let them know that where they are in the family order doesn't necessarily have to define who they are throughout society. And just be aware of that.
And finding situations, I think, for the individual child. Like, so my younger sister is a really bold personality and she's really outgoing, where I tend to go into a room and shrink down real small. She's like really confident and outgoing towards people. So I think it's hard if if me and Joy were to enter a room, it's the conflicting personalities are kind of hard for me to take a conversation and run with it, because she's more bold and she can carry the conversation, where I struggle a little bit more. So if I was put in a situation alone, then I can kind of figure that out versus me going in with her. And that's been helpful as we've both branched out into our own circles and our own careers and lives, is that I've been forced now to start pathing my own way.
Yeah, that's been, we've always used a buddy system. And Joy has been Brittany's buddy for a lot of years. And as we came here to give them permission to say, it's okay to start developing your own connections, your own network, it's been hard, because it's hard to see Brittany go off by herself without having her buddy, and vice versa. But I'm beginning to see them each grow and blossom in completely different ways. So I almost think we have to also, family is important and the tribe is important, but individuality is also important. So one of the lessons that I'm learning as we launch this crowd is saying, I applaud you, go make new friends, then they don't have to be friends of Joy's.
Right.
So that's been really helpful.
Right. Because the people that she connects with aren't necessarily going to be the people that I connect and click well with. She has a friend that's super bubbly and outgoing, and that's just, I'm
Scary.
not like a super bubbly outgoing person. So yeah, our crowds are going to be different anyways, especially as we get older, our personalities become stronger, I feel like, as we figure out who we are.
Yeah. Both Mom and I tend to be very strong personalities. And so when you're in our family, breaking out of the bubble of being Randy and Kristen's daughter or son is a challenge.
Right.
But I think it's been good here because nobody really cares who we are. Like they did in New York, we had build a network. And so you were never going to escape that bubble.
Right. You're the pastor's daughter.
Yeah. Here, it's kind of like, oh, he's the old guy over in the corner, but you're the person we want to connect with. You know, at church, growing up in church, I can always remember like people would pick up the old ladies who had no ride. And so they'd have their heavy coat on, the scarf, right? And they'd be holding their purse in the corner. And they'd be waiting for their ride home. And nobody really cared to ask them how they were doing or anything. They would just be waiting patiently to go home. And our old lady we picked up every Sunday on the way to church from the time I was a young boy to the time I was a teenager was Mrs. Miller. And we'd pick her up and she'd just be waiting at the door at the end. That's how I am at church now. I'm just sitting there with my shawl and my purse waiting to go home when my kids get done visiting.
We call him Man Paw. Gotta go pick up Man Paw.
Just waiting for my kids to give me a ride home so I can take my nap. So. Well, thank you for joining me. I hope some of this was helpful. I know it's hard when we're shy and introverted, but just because we're introverted doesn't mean we still don't have to show people love and connection. It may mean that it's different, but it doesn't have to define us. Sometimes our kids being shy, and that a lot of times kids will grow out of that, but a lot of that comes from giving them opportunity. I don't enjoy chaos, but we have a place here called Fritz's Family Adventure where it's just like there's hanging things and jumping things and falling things, and it's just mass chaos. But I like going there with my kids because they have to learn how to interact with other people in situations and develop that. And I can supervise that, and then we can talk about it. And so a lot of times over the years, especially with Brittany, when she'd go to drum camp, I would push her heavily. So when the first year she went to drum camp, I signed her up for the advanced student class. She probably wasn't quite there.
Probably not. And I was the only girl in a class of 20 to 30 really good guy drummers. So yeah, it was terrifying. But I grew and learned more than I would have in any other level.
And then the whole time we came back, we kind of debriefed. What happened? What were the interactions? What is the strategy you would employ? What relationships do you continue? Those type of things.
Right.
So we've done a lot of analysis after the fact.
Right. Like that year I learned, so I like to raise my hands when I worship, but I would realize I tried doing this thing at camp that year. In my row, like everybody would kind of be sitting down during worship and not doing anything. They'd be on their phones or whatever. But if I stood up and I was the only person who stood up and I like raised my hands or I got into worship, I realized that the people around me would then kind of stand up and they'd also join. So you like, by stepping out, you also give people permission to also step out and join you.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a way of serving. You just, when you're young, apparently I served a lot because I would do stuff acting up, and your parents are always like, stop drawing attention to yourself. You need to just sit there and behave. Well, then all of a sudden we're in a youth rally and everyone's like, yeah, just start, doing things. And those things, I understand that the intent of it is to worship God. But ultimately, when I raise my hands or I do something different than everybody else in the room is doing, I'm drawing attention to myself and I'm risking things. I'm risking a spanking in the church bathroom, right? Those are the types of things that are in our head. And our brains are interesting. Our brains look for pattern recognition. So all we see is in an experience a pattern that was similar, and it doesn't have to be exact. It doesn't even matter, right? All that matters is my brain recognizes drawing attention to myself in church is dangerous because it was really dangerous when I was 3 or 4 years old. And if I sat there with my hands folded and looked handsome, I was going to be rewarded for that. But if I acted up at all or drew any attention to myself, I would usually be called to the front of the church or taken to the church bathroom or something in that nature. So it was really hard to come to a place as an adult where suddenly I have freedom to do things that may draw attention to myself because my brain said, no, this is going to have bad consequences.
Yeah.
And you may have had some of that to overcome. When you're a young parent, some of the things that you learn. I appreciate you joining me. We appreciate this community very much, and we are excited about what God is doing in your lives. I have 9 children. We've graduated 5. Brittany was the 4th graduate. She has transitioned phenomenally into life. I'm very proud of her and the contribution that she makes here to the press and to those around her. And we just want it to be an example for an encouragement to your family as well. So may you have a blessed day, and be sure to let us know your comments, your thoughts for a chance.
It's upside down.
2,500 reward points. There you go. Hey, God bless you guys. We'll talk to you later.
Bye.